the podcast Empowering People, a show dedicated to helping folks find their path to success. Sponsored by Hypnosis Works LLC and Realty MD. Your hosts, Dave MEMBRILA and Martha Dabdoub. Take it away, folks. Welcome to another episode of Empowering People with your host, David MEMBRILA from Hypnosis Works LLC and Realty MD, as well as
Martha Dabdoub.
From Realty MD, she is my broker and boss. With us today, we have KVOA's anchorman, sports person, and celebrity of all time, Mr. Paul CICALA. Everybody,
Welcome, Paul. Welcome.
Now, one of the reasons that we invited Paul on the show is, number one, he's a homeboy from
the Tucson thing.
From the Tucson thing.
You know it.
And grew up on the south side. I'm going to let him tell you a story. So again, the whole idea behind empowering people is to inspire folks along the way to get on the road to success, whatever they feel success may be, whether it's getting that great job, getting back in college, buying that house, making $1 million, or just losing 5 to 10 pounds. Paul, take it away.
All right. What do you need to say? What do you want me to say? Well, first, I would like to say that I'm proud of both of you. I think it's great. You guys are using your influences as people in Tucson that are leaders, as educators, as people that are selling homes, making dreams for people come alive, and I appreciate it. And the fact that you invited me on your podcast, this is really cool. As a fellow native Tucsonan, it means a lot to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll pay you later. Thank you.
Thank you for taking time off.
No, thank you.
So tell us about. I know. I mean, just through our personal relationship that we know people in El Paso.
That's crazy.
So give me your life story from how you got to Tucson, where you
okay.
came from. And
All right, we're going to start from the beginning. El Paso was the market that I worked in before here, but obviously I was born and raised Tucson Southside. I'm a product of the Sunnyside Unified School District. Just like Marta, I grew up in the Sunnyside District. I'm now finding out that we were at Chaparral almost at the same time, junior high, middle school. She ended up going to Sunnyside. I went to Desert View. My mom, of course, graduated class of 1965, Sunnyside. I was born and raised on the South Side. I bounced around a lot as a kid, though. All parts of different South Side in the Sunnyside District. I went to Elvira. I went to Los Niños. I went to Gallego. I went to Craycroft. What else? Chaparral, of course, Desert View. I mean, I was just one of those kids that we bounced
Very
around.
Very diverse, yeah.
We did. And then we moved around in different spots, little apartments here and there. Or, there's a bunch of little trailers up and down Bilby and Drexel, Benson Highway and all that. So I grew up in a trailer, but I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my upbringing. I'm proud of coming from the South Side, and I'm proud to say that people, just because there's a stereotype that the South Side has always been the quote-unquote bad side of town, that's not the case. Number one, there's a lot of working families, and there's a lot of people that might not have as much money as other parts of town, but guess what? There's hardworking familias that are there, that are doing their stuff every single day, and there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of success stories, as you know, from the Sunnyside Unified School District as well.
what kind of kid were you in school? Were you?
I was a good student. I always worked hard. I would take pride that nobody's given me anything in life, and I've always worked hard. And since you ask, most people don't know this about me, and I don't really talk about it, but since you're asking, I'm going to tell you, I was a good enough student, I guess, to graduate valedictorian from Desert View High School.
Congratulations.
Did you have to do the whole speech and everything?
No. Okay, let me tell you right now, I'm one of the very few people in life that can say that they were voted most likely to succeed. I was valedictorian, but I was also voted class clown because I was a big travieso in high school. And when I was in high school, they didn't... And it might have been, I felt slighted, like it could have been because of me, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I did get into a little bit of trouble. It was more like just being a travieso. I was a hothead. I was in sports, and I'll admit sometimes I got in fights or what have you. That's just kind of the era that we grew up in. It was almost like this gangster era back in the day where people were joining gangs. There was always mad dogging each other and stuff like that. I was never in a gang, but I had friends. But everybody was always looking for a fight, and especially in sports. So I got into my fair share of trouble. So anyway. No, they didn't have the automatic valedictorian gets their speech at my high school, and they should have been, and I'm pretty sure, and I remember I talked to the principal at the time, and I was like, well, and they were like, no, you have to try out like everybody else for the speeches. I was like, okay. So I didn't really get a speech, which is good, though, because I probably wouldn't have time to write something. I was so busy, you think about the last few weeks of high school and everything, And going back to was I a good student? I was a good student not because I'm smarter than anybody else, because I'm not. I know as human beings, we all have the capacity to do well. And really, the people that do well in school, that get A's, it's because they studied. I worked my butt off. I mean, like, I know that some people might have a little bit more skills when it comes to math or science or what have you, but I feel like as a whole, we all as human beings have similar opportunities. And I tell this to students all the time. If somebody gets all A's and B's, it's not because they're smarter, it's because they're putting effort into their homework. It's because they're working hard. It's because they're saying, I'm gonna study for this test, I'm not gonna procrastinate, I'm gonna get this stuff done. And I got good grades because of that. And even when I was in high school, I was always an A and B student. I wasn't necessarily an all A student, but when I got to high school, my first semester, I got all A's. And I just told myself, you know what? I got all A's. I'm gonna try to make this goal here to keep getting all A's as long as I can. So I made that goal only because I got all A's my first semester as a freshman. And luckily, everything worked out, and I graduated with a 4.0. They didn't have a weighted system back then, so the AP classes still just counted as a 4. So I was lucky enough to graduate with the 4.0 and graduated valedictorian. And most people don't believe it. Even when I was in high school, my friends that weren't in classes with me, they're like, well, you got all A's? Shut up, Paul. You know what I'm saying? Because I was a big travieso back in the day. Still am. But yeah.
So were you a pretty good athlete as well?
I mean, I think I was good enough. I mean, I was good enough to be, when I left Desert View High School, mind you, Desert View wasn't that old in those days. I mean, Sunnyside and Desert View had kind of like split off. And my freshman year was, I think, the first 4-year class at Desert View. Like good athletes, like you might remember the name Adam Rodriguez and those.
Oh my
names
gosh,
back in the day.
just the wrestling matches, the football games.
Yeah, and he was a senior when I was a freshman, but that was the first graduating class of 4 years from people that didn't get split up from Sunnyside and Desert View. Yeah. So Desert View had only been around maybe 7 or 8 years by the time I graduated, but I was good enough to athlete to be, I was a starting point guard at Desert View, and I like to brag that I had the school record of most assists at the time. But I mean, like I said, it's not like Desert View have been around for multiple decades. But I had 2 school records. One I'm proud of and one I'm not. And I'm sure both of them have been broken. Maybe the second one not. Most career assists and most career technical fouls. Because I got technicals. I was a hothead, and I'm not justifying it, but I'm a competitor. And like I said, we were in that era where trash talk was big, but I would take it personal. I'd be like, you want to talk smack? Let's walk outside after the game, or let's do this, or somebody gets in your face and you want to throw down, right? So I would get technicals because of it. But I respect the heck out of my coach, Raul Hodgers, who's from Nogales. He's part of like these great teams in Nogales high school history. Then he was at Desert View, and he had a rule. He was like, if you get a technical, you are suspended the next game. And I hated that, but it taught you a lesson. And I got plenty of times where I had to sit out a game because I got that one technical where I would, and I'll tell you a story. Can I tell you?
Please,
can we just be candid?
Go for it.
Okay. Unfortunately, my senior year, I didn't get to walk out that great moment when it's the last home game where you walk out with your parents or family members.
Senior
that can be there. I didn't get to do it because the game before, I think it was against Sabino High School, I got into it with another player while we were playing. And I thought the ref was a little bit being against me more than him. And the ref was acting like he was one of those guys that abused their power, like, I don't know, he had this power trip. So he's sitting there, he gives me the technical, so I sit on the bench. And I'm like, man, dang it, I'm out. I'm stuck now. I'm not going to be able, the next game, the way our rules are, I'm going to be suspended. I'm not going to be able to, be there my last senior game. I got to play in the playoffs after that. We made it to divisionals and all that postseason, but still, my last home game. But anyways, when I was sitting on the bench, and it's funny because my friends still bring this up to this day, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just a kid growing up making decisions and bad decisions. So the referee, I'm this kid that's mad already. I'm on the bench, and of course, I'm sitting mad dogging the referee who gave me the technical. But here's the thing, man. I mean, it's almost like a corrupt someone that might be in the law that's trying to instigate you because they want to, throw the book at you. I almost felt that way. So every time he was running up and down the court, I'm sitting on the bench, this kid that's mad and mad dogging the ref, he's mad dogging me back saying, what? Like, what are you going to do? Like, come on, why are you going to bait a kid like that? I'm a 17-year-old. But anyways, I responded, I'm not just saying, by going like this to the ref. And he goes, that's it, you're out of there. So I got thrown out at Desert View. I got thrown out of, I had got kicked off the bench. I had to go to the locker room for the rest of the game. But little did I know, I was the laughing stock of the school the next day because everybody was talking about it. My dad was in the stands, and he was so mad at that because he saw the ref was trying to do that. My dad was down, and he wanted to throw. He was like getting into it with the ref, and he was kind of going down and wanted to throw down with the ref. And then Lalo Cubillas, the principal at that time at Desert View, apparently he got in my dad's face, and my dad and him were getting into it. I didn't know about this because I was in the locker room. But anyways, I don't know if we won or lost or whatever. I got suspended the next game by my coach. And the next day at school, everybody's like, "Oh man, it was so funny. Paul was gonna first get in a fight with the other player, then he wanted to fight the ref, then he got thrown out, and then his dad got thrown out of the game because he was gonna throw." My dad got kicked out too. They escorted him out of the gym. All that. I don't know if there was, back in those days, we didn't have police officers at high school like they do now. Well, actually, we did. We did have a few. I don't know if there was an officer or security guard, but anyways, it was just funny because everybody was just saying like, yeah, that Paul. And I'm trying not to, it's weird because since I'm talking to you guys almost like friends and not from a broadcasting role, I'm like almost holding back F-bombs here because it's, I almost want to use I want to use them as like adjectives or adverbs in this sense. But
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, I don't know. I mean, that was just me, and I've always been a competitive person, and I've also always been a person that's really cool. I feel like I take pride in being nice and friendly to everybody, and I treat people the way they treat me. And in that case, I was being mistreated by that ref who was abusing his power. He really was. It was like he was doing that on purpose to like egg me on, and boom, I was kicked out. But it was just funny that everybody was laughing. Like, Paul got kicked out, and then his dad got thrown out of the stadium, and whatever. It was the gym, not the stadium.
Yes.
Yeah.
So after you graduated from high school, then what path did you take? Is that when you took off to Texas?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, just Texas was my most recent stop.
Okay.
As a journalist, we have to bounce around a lot. There's not a lot of jobs in journalism. And that's why a lot of times when I talk at career fairs and such, I say, if you want to be a journalist, do it up, go for it, broadcasting, but always have a backup career. Because when you think about it, there's thousands and thousands of people graduating with journalism degrees every year, but there's very few jobs. And even, for instance, even at, most stations only have 5 or 6 anchors. And then usually one doesn't leave for 1 or 2 years. So then there's that one opening, and when there's that one opening, there's thousands of resumes of people applying. Hundreds, or at least hundreds, if not thousands. So you're up against all of them. It's a very competitive industry, and you can be really good, but you just never get your break. I mean, I also think a good thing is our good buddy, Steve Nunez. I mean, he was a great broadcaster for many years here.
Tucson's homeboy.
Yes, he is.
With the Tucson thing.
And also, but he'll tell you how tough this industry is because, after he left it and wanted to get back in, it was hard because when there's no job openings. And then sometimes when there's the job opening for that dream job that you want, you can't take it because you're stuck under contract. And that's just how it is. So anyways.
And you can't breaking the contract.
Yeah, well, if they usually wouldn't even go after you, they go after the station that is trying to hire you, and they would call that tampering or what have you. So because they wouldn't go after you. It's not like you're the one that has all this money. Journalists don't and I tell students, journalists don't make a lot of money. The starting salary when I was coming out of college for a journalist, my first job in TV news after graduating from USC, University of Southern California, was $14,000 a year. And now even the first year reporters, you make like $22,000 or something like that. Yeah, and it is what it is. We can't complain about it. Just like as teachers deserve a lot more money. As a teacher.
Yes.
But teachers don't usually complain about it because it's the career choice they chose. And they also say, you know what, I wanted to choose a career that I can feel fulfilled and I can shape lives, and you do as a teacher and you do as an educator. And I feel like as a journalist we can as well because we get the opportunity to report history and be there and do stories that sometimes can make an impact. But going back to what you were saying, after I graduated from high school, one of my biggest role models in life, you may know him, and he might have been your teacher, Chaparral. Art Morioki, Coach Morioki.
He was one of mine too.
Okay,
he was
a DJ too.
He was like a
Were
father
you in
to
that
me.
Christian
Fellowship of Christian Athletes? You got me in that,
and then
yes.
we do the sit-ups and the push-ups.
Oh, you were
I
in
was
that?
part of it.
Oh my gosh! Okay,
yes,
so we both have done the same thing.
He was such an example, a father figure, role model at that time.
100%. And for me, he took me in. He went to high school with my mom at Sunnyside.
We might have been to his parties. He would invite us to his parties.
No, I'm sure. I was probably that little shrimp kid.
I was there.
Because I was such a late bloomer in life. I was always the shortest guy in the basketball team until like even my senior year. So I was probably that little, shrimp that you were like, who's this little kid? Because I was. But anyways, yeah.
But we were all super young, but I know that he would invite us to his house.
No, he did everything for
and
students.
do dinners and lunches for us and motivation.
He was almost like, the names are similar, Morioki and Miyagi. I was like Daniel's son, and he was my Mr. Miyagi. Yeah. I'm not kidding. Yeah. And my middle name is Daniel, which makes it perfect. And in Spanish, you know that Dennis the Menace is Daniel el Travieso. So that's perfect. No. But anyways, but he was my single biggest influence in life. And that's why I know how important teachers are and educators are and coaches. And he bought me my first pair of basketball shoes. I wanted to play basketball at Chaparral. I didn't have the money for shoes, and he bought me my first pair of basketball shoes. And he was always there for me. He was the one that told me from the beginning in his classes, and I got good grades. I was really blessed, and I was good in math and science, and he was a math teacher. And Coach Morioki, Mr. Morioki would always tell me and others, like, nobody's gonna do anything for you. You got to do it yourself. And if you don't have the money for college, there's opportunities, but you got to work hard. You got to get good grades. You got to get scholarships. If not scholarships, you can join the Army. There's the GI Bill. There's plenty of opportunities out there. There's loans, there's this, there's that. I mean, like, you can do it, but you have to start now in high school. And he was my guidance. He was there for me.
I have to ditto with you. He was one influencer in my life too. When he passed, I reached out to Julie.
Away.
I reached out to Julie and to Patty, and I was like, you guys don't know what he meant
to
me
Patty,
in my world,
exactly.
right? And how, you're the perfect example
and
of
when
what
he
he
even
meant to
passed
you.
too, the sad reality is, and it's funny, he was such an avid golfer too, among other sports, and he was a basketball coach, a volleyball coach, everything. And we were always in, I'm not exaggerating when I said he took me in like a son, so he was like a father to me, and he was always in my life, even as an adult. And I was working in the Palm Springs area at the time, and it was called the Kraft Nabisco Classic, I think, but it was a women's LPGA major, and at the time, Lorena Ochoa, the famous golfer from Mexico, from Guadalajara, who went to U of A, she was dominating the scene, and he wanted, and I said, listen, I can get you tickets, I can hook you up, we'll get access. She kind of knew him because they'd known each other from volunteering realms of Tucson or whatever. He was set to come visit me, and a few weeks before that, he passed away. And I got the call from
it was devastating.
his son, and it was so devastating for me because I was like thinking, and he had everything to look forward to. He was retired. He only kind of semi-left retirement because at Sunnyside they needed somebody as the ISS teacher, so he was doing that. And I would see him every day because when I came back to Tucson at the time, in the year 2000 to 2003, I was working at KOLD as a news reporter. I worked for News 13 and news, and I'd fill in for sports. I'd fill in as an anchor, but if I didn't make it as a reporter, I would have been a teacher, and I was a substitute teacher. And my days off were Mondays and Tuesdays, and there was like a stretch where probably I worked like 180 straight days between being a reporter at KOLD at the time and being a teacher, substitute. But I remember it was great because I would, you want to go back and give back in the neighborhood you grew up in. So I would try to, get my subbing in at Desert View and Sunnyside. And even more so at Sunnyside because he was there and I knew I could visit him every day. I'd walk into his class and, kids that got into trouble that were in ISS, he was a good role model. You know how it is if you've ever been in ISS. Yeah. They're tough at first and you write the rules, you do all this, but then they start lightening up and start saying, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want this to be your life? Do you want that to be life? So I really enjoyed being able to go visit him and then still even talk to the kids too, that he was quote unquote disciplining, but he was
an impact. I bet you he was making an impact right there and then with that right group
and I mean
that needed it.
He would lend me his car when I would come to Tucson, and he almost gave me his car basically. He sold it to me for like nickels and dimes. I got my first car because of Coach Morioki. He taught me how to change a tire. He taught me how to do an oil change. He was always there for me. Anytime for the school year, before the school year started, he'd be like, Paul, let me buy you some clothes. He would get me some school clothes. He was always there for me, but I wouldn't have even been the basketball player that I am. Not that I'm all that great, but I mean, I wouldn't even have probably been in it because I grew up being a wrestler too. In the Sunnyside district, we grew up early doing the wrestling stuff and everything, and I did that as a youngster, but I probably would have stuck with that or soccer had it not been for him buying me my first pair of basketball shoes and then playing for him. And at the time, it was Coach Olguin, Robert Olguin, I don't know if you remember him, at Chaparral. But anyways, I mean,
so he was the main factor in your life,
he's
a
the
father
biggest factor
figure.
in my life.
He was a teacher,
yes,
right, a supporter.
And he knew my background, and he knew how I grew up. He knew You know, he went to, like I said, he went to high school with my mom. They went, you know, Humberto Federico, they were there,
Humberto
played
Federico.
65.
We were
Coach
good friends.
Bermudez back in those days too. Felix Bermudez, who passed away. He was my baseball coach. But they all, you know, so he knew my background. He, you know, unfortunately, my brother and I were total opposites. My brother got into a lot of trouble. He was a dropout at the age of 15. He was in and out of jail, you know, most of his adult life. His lifestyle caught up with him. My brother died of a drug overdose, and so I learned a lot. But Coach Morioki was like knew my background, and he knew sometimes when I was having these problems. Nah, Paul, you know, even when I was moving away to college, you know, I'd come back to Tucson. He'd be like, you know, Paul, you have a place to stay here if you feel more comfortable, because I didn't feel comfortable going back to that trailer that I lived in at the time, because there was just a lot of psychological stuff that went on, and there were just things that we could talk about maybe, and I talk about it when I do speeches and stuff too. But I mean, 2 people died in that bedroom that I lived in and that I grew up in that trailer.
Oh my God.
My brother was found dead there after his drug overdose, and my ex-girlfriend's cousin was shot and killed in my own bedroom, in the bedroom that I was, not when I was there. Not when
I would have not gone back
when I
either.
left, when I left.
Yes.
This was after I went to college, but I mean, like, that trailer is doomed, man, and it's haunted probably. And I go back sometimes, lot 188. I'll go back and I'll drive there just to look, and it's still there. And there's a family there, and there's a family living there, and they're thriving there. And I notice now, you know, there's like a little patch where you can like plant stuff, but most people don't. It's just a trailer. There's no yard.
Yeah.
But I see that they're putting flowers or something there, and I'm like, man, good for them. They're making the best of it. And I hope that they don't know the history of that
Yes.
trailer, that bedroom on the on the north side of it has had it probably has 2 ghosts in there.
I'm just hoping that if you're watching this
Yeah.
and you live there.
Yeah, well,
that
I'm not going to say the address, but I'm just going to say it was on the south side. And if anybody who knows the Sunnyside District and the south side, the whole area up and down, Bilby, Drexel, Benson Highway,
Park.
it's full of just a bunch of little trailer parks and this and that. So it was lot 188 in a particular one, and that's all I'm going to say. Now
let's go
somebody's
back
going to
to-
hear lot 188, and they're like, oh, no, that's me.
Let's go back
Yeah.
to USC. Was
Yes.
that on an academic or athletic scholarship?
No, man, I wish athletic. That means I would be a really good athlete. I mean, I'm a good intramural athlete, you know, like, but.
Well, I guess before we go to that and we
Yeah.
go to the USC,
Yeah.
did you already know you were going for the career that you're in now?
Well, here's the deal, okay? And I mean, you guys will all appreciate this, you know, especially you as an educator, and Coach Morioki was my influence. I was really good at math and science. And my SAT score for math, I don't remember exactly, but it was like 700 or something. And I don't even think they have the same scoring system. But my verbal was only like 380. And it wasn't because I was dumb. It's because I didn't grow up around a bunch of people that used big words. And as you know, in those SATs, they're doing all these comparison with these big words that you've never even used or heard of, and it throws you off. So anyways, but I actually was really good at math and science. And I was always told, especially by Coach Morioki, Art Morioki, and others, you need to be an engineer. I mean, engineers, they're good at math and science, this and that. So I actually got accepted to USC as an environmental engineering major.
Oh, wow.
But
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
On scholarship?
Yeah.
On scholarship?
No, well, I had some outside agency scholarships, but it was financial. I got financial aid, you know, like everybody else, the Pell Grant, all different grants. And USC is really good. USC offers 100% of your financial need, which means it's a combination of a lot of grants, but there are outside agency, they're all loans in the whole 9 yards. But anyways, since I had a 4.0 GPA, and that didn't even guarantee getting accepted to USC. USC's, and their standards have gone up over the years, so it's really hard to get accepted to USC. So I was glad that I did. But I got a combination of scholarships and outside agency scholarships and financial aid, but I didn't get a scholarship from USC.
Because
no.
it is a private school, right? It's not like the other schools.
And that's why they can offer that. And at the time, my dad was making in those days like $16,000 a year or something like that. And he had just been unemployed, so I got quote unquote 100% of the financial need.
Wow.
And which so I owe a lot to them. And then when I was at USC, I became a residential advisor, and that helped me out a lot because you don't have to worry about housing, and food is taken care of too. So anyways, that's how I financed that. And a lot of people still don't realize that financial aid also includes, besides scholarships, work study. So as a freshman, I worked at the campus dining hall, and I was a dishwasher. And I'd always worked. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a paper boy when I was 12 years old, and a lot of that stuff, Coach Morioki, he was like, Paul, we want you to play basketball. I don't have a job. What do you do? I'm a paper boy. And then I worked at Village Inn when I was 15 as a server, as a bus boy. 16 to 18, I worked at Whataburger. So I was always working, and so it wasn't a big deal to me. And I was strategically got a job at the campus dining hall at USC EVK for part of my work study because I knew that I would get free food out of it too. So, you know, and don't get me wrong, it's a tough job being a dishwasher, but it's not that bad when you're working with friends or people that you get along with, because then you're messing around, shooting the you know what, and I learned a lot in life because when I was at USC being that dishwasher, some of my best friends in life were other students that were in my position too, that kind of came from similar backgrounds, and also USC is in a pretty rough neighborhood. It's getting a little bit better now over the years. That area's getting a little gentrified, blah blah blah. But I mean, it's South Central LA. And there's a stereotype of South Central LA. They think, you know, it's like NWA, straight out of Compton type stuff. But I mean, and don't get me wrong, it could be. And at that time, that's when Dr. Dre and all them were really in effect in the 90s.
Yeah.
But there's a big Central American population, a lot of Guatemalans, Salvadorians, and a lot of the people from that region that had come from war-torn countries because they had their civil wars going on. So I learned a lot in life because I grew up in Tucson. I grew up in the South Side, which is mostly, you know, Mexicanos, Mexico-Americanos, Chicanos, this and that. And you know, so I really got a true experience of what diversity was like because I got to see other Latinos when I was there. And I worked with people, you know, in the back that weren't the students, but also some of the workers that were there, that was their job, that were also washing dishes alongside of me. So I was learning from
Their
people
cultures,
from Guatemala, El
yeah.
Salvador, and it was something different from the dominant Mexican culture that you're around if you grew up in the South Side of
Yes.
Tucson. So I was really exposed to just even a new world of diversity. So I did that, and then I worked at, you know, when I was in college, I ended up working as a security guard at USC. I was campus security, USC. I worked, but the best job was when I worked at the residential advisor, like you said, but like I said, but also when I worked at the library, at the reference center, the famous Doheny Library at USC. If you know anything about the history of USC, and the reference center. But I did that on purpose too, because I would make my shift was from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. when people are just studying or cramming for tests or whatever, but you're not that busy. So I was like, strategically, I did that because I could study during that time. And I was allowed to, you know, luckily I graduated magna cum laude from USC.
Wow.
And but I worked hard. I mean, I busted my butt, and that's why. And I always worked hard to get scholarships, and I knew that certain scholarships I had, you had to keep a 3.5 anyway. So
You worked
I've always
hard and you
worked.
worked smart.
Well, I did, and the thing is, I mean,
Right?
that's
I
the
mean,
key
you
in
worked as a
life.
dishwasher so that you can feed yourself. You
Yes.
worked at the library so that you can study.
100%.
Right?
Exactly. So I mean, I always tell people when it comes to grades, like I said at the beginning of all this, when you get good grades, a lot of times it's not because you're smarter than somebody else. And you know, like some people, like I said, might have particularly better skills in math or what have you, but as a whole, as human beings, we're all capable of doing well. The people that get good grades are the ones that have discipline and have willpower and say, you know what, I'm not gonna go out tonight, I'm not gonna do this, I'm gonna study, and I'm gonna put effort into the homework and the assignments that I do so I can get a good grade.
As a teacher, I knew a lot of kids who were smart kids but lazy.
Yeah,
And
100%.
and a thousand
I was a
kids
crammer.
who were
I had a test that night. My sister like, turn off that music and that TV, and I had to listen with distraction to pass the test. I mean, because we were enjoying the college
I will
arena
say this,
too.
though. Sometimes I wish I didn't put so much emphasis because I've always been a ball of stress in my entire life. And in my line of work is a very stressful job because you're always under deadline. You cannot be late. You can't miss the 5 or the 6 or the 10 o'clock newscast because if you do, guess what? I mean, you'll eventually get fired because that show is going to go on no matter what, with or without you. You cannot miss deadlines in my line of work. And so it's a stressful industry, but I was putting stress on myself back in my high school days, and I would get these bad migraines because I was putting so much pressure on myself to get good grades. And I never went to even though as much as I got into trouble in school and stuff like that, I never went to like a ditch day or something. And I kind of look back at it and I feel like, man, I missed out on some of those fun times that other people had. I was a virgin until I was over 18. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like,
that's TMI.
well, okay, sorry, but I mean, my point is I wasn't into that party culture or all that, and I was into like working, sports, and school. And just always concentrated on that. And I was focused, and a lot of that was Coach Morioki would tell me, you're not going to get into college, you're not going to get scholarships if you don't do it for yourself.
Well, how about the discipline from your parents? How was that?
I think that helped a little bit, but I grew up like a lot of people on the South Side. I grew up in a single-parent household, and you know, unfortunately, my role model early in life, he's gonna be your older brother. I mean, that's how I learned how to fight. He was 2 years older than me, and you know, obviously when you have an older brother, they're bigger than you, so you're gonna get your butt kicked every day and until maybe you become their size. And I still remember the first time that I was able to whoop him, and after that he never messed with me again. But anyways, but I didn't really have that in my home. I mean, don't get me wrong, my dad was great, and you know, he encouraged me, but he also it wasn't like he wanted, you know, was pushing, you need to go to college, you need to do this. And I also think now, because my brother got into a lot of trouble, and because my brother was a dropout, you know, in and out of getting in problems with the law and the whole 9 yards, I think that maybe at the time, maybe my dad didn't want to tell me, hey, I love you, or I want you to do this, or I want, you know, you need to do this, because maybe the norm had been set with my brother. I don't know, and he didn't want to make it look like he's shaming him. I don't know. I mean, I dealt with those little things all my life, because I always felt like I always wished that I worked really hard for what I got, and I always felt like I wish that I would have got a little bit more encouragement from the family side. But my mom, you know, I grew up with my mom until I was around 12 years old, and she ended up getting remarried. My parents were divorced, and she ended up getting remarried, and out of all places, the person that she married, he was alcoholic and lost his job. So he got a job in Mississippi, out of all places. And I was this young kid, and I'm like, man, I ain't going to no Mississippi. I mean, like, my family's in Tucson. I was born and raised in Tucson, this and that. So at the time, my dad couldn't take me in because he was going through a little bit of a rut in life. So I lived with my aunt and uncle, who I treasure to this day, you know, as being like true father figures and mother figures to me at that time. And then after my dad was able to get back on his feet, then I moved back with my dad in high school. So, you know, I had that. Don't get me wrong. My aunt and my uncle, my grandmother, my grandfather, when they were alive, they were very supportive. But when it came to just being in the environment that I was in, I didn't have that role model, except for like the teachers, the coaches in life that told me, you know, this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it, and no excuses, man. Get off your butt. We're in the United States, and there's a lot of opportunities for you if you take advantage of them.
So what I'm hearing you say, Paul, is that you didn't have a bed of roses growing up. It wasn't a bed of roses.
And I don't want this to be a woe's me story either. I don't even talk about my background as much unless somebody asks.
I think what's powerful is that you grew up like everybody else did, and despite the obstacles, you saw your way through that. That's great. I'm going to give you a sports question now.
Yeah, no problem.
You played basketball for USC.
Yes. No, I wish I played for USC.
Oh, I thought you did. I saw you wearing the first.
No. I wore that jersey because that was when I was working as a journalist in El Paso, and I was covering news and sports there right before I moved back to Tucson. And it was at UTEP at the famous Don Haskins, you know, where Don Haskins built this whole arena and the whole 9 yards. And they had a media halftime little tournament. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be like Al Bundy, relive my glory. So I got my USC jersey on. I'm shooting hoops. So if you've seen me in that USC jersey with the crowd behind me, that was the crowd. And I was actually 38 years old when that picture was taken. So thanks for making me feel like that was me. It's a 21-year-old in college. A 21-year-old in college. Yeah. I was like,
okay,
I'm 39 years old now. I was probably around like 38 or something when that picture was taken that you're probably referring to.
Yes. USC and U of A basketball teams are playing. Who do you cheer for?
U of A, 100%. I mean, here's the deal. I was born and raised Arizona.
You remind me of something.
No, born and raised U of A. I'm Wildcat through and through. That said, I love USC too, and it's stressful when they play because I don't want one of my teams to lose. But what I end up doing is I generally cheer for the U of A. However, if one team has more to gain than the other, like let's just say they're playing at the end of the year, USC or U of A has already locked up a Pac-12 championship in basketball, USC is a bubble team and they really need this victory to get into the tournament, I will then cheer for USC. Reluctantly, I hate to cheer against U of A, but I'm like, U of A is not going to lose anything with this loss. They're still going to be a number one seed, blah, blah, blah. It just depends on the circumstances. Same thing when they play in football. I will end up generally cheering for the U of A, but if U of A has 2 wins, you know, if it's a season where they're not having the best of years and USC has a chance to make it to a big bowl game, I'm going to be like, well, U of A's season's lost. I want the Pac-12 to continue to do well. And I'm one of the few people that cheer for the rivals. I don't necessarily cheer for them, but I want ASU to do well when they're not playing U of A because that's the Pac-12. And the better ASU does, and that's the same thing at USC. We have 2 rivals at USC. We have Notre Dame and we have UCLA. And I want both of them to do well because the better they do, the better it makes USC look. The better it makes the Pac-12 look. So anyways, so that's a tough one. I lose sleep every time USC and Arizona play. I hate it because one of my teams has to lose. I hate it.
Paul, describe yourself in one word.
Hyper energetic.
hyper energetic.
If it was 2, I'd say a hard worker because I take pride in my work ethic. But
If you had your close friends, if they had 3 adjectives to describe you,
no, one of these.
how would they describe you? 3 words.
3 words. Dedicated. I would say hardworking, but that counts as 2 words, so I'm gonna use it in Spanish, trabajador. So that counts as 1. All right.
Good one.
And caring, because I mean, I truly do care about other people. I care about the little man. I care about the little woman, the people in life
Why did you
that
look at
are
me when you
struggling.
said little man?
This is the lead singer for the famous Spanish rock group Enanitos
Enrique.
Verdes. Hey, estoy aquí. Now I sound like Steve Nunez trying to sing. No disrespect, Steve.
Shout
We
out
love you.
Steve
We love you,
Nunez.
Steve. And
Do
how many times have I
something.
just given love to Steve? A million times. But,
Speaking
but
of
I know
Steve,
Steve with his singing.
Were
All
you
right.
ever in competition for a position that he was applying
Never.
to?
You know what? I've never felt that competitive thing. I know we're out there, and it's, in news especially. When I was a news reporter at KVOA, I would run into him out in the field, and he was a K-gun. And you know,
Did you
there's
guys
that,
ever apply for the same position?
No, never like that. But we might have been in certain competitions if we're both covering a breaking news story, like a murder or something that happened. And sometimes you're like, okay, you know, this is going back to my news reporting years. You know, when I was in the market at the same time as Steve, you might see them out in the field, and you're like, okay, this murder scene happened at like 4. We got to go live at 5, so I have an hour. And in my mind, I'm gonna try to get one witness or one person interview or knock on one more door, so that little competitive drive says I want to do something more than what the competitor is doing. And in that sense, yeah, but we've never competed for the same job or anything like that. And I was very, very lucky in life that later on in life, after Steve Nunez was the news director for a station in the Yuma area, he was an anchor out there as well. He came back to Tucson, and he ended up being the executive producer of the morning show at KVOA. And it was awesome that I got to work with him for 3 or 4 years. So. You know, I've always looked up to him as a journalist. We were always friends, and I think we've become better friends, and we've respected each other more in life as years progressed, especially because we work together.
Yep. Okay, so it seems like everything you've done, pretty much, in spite of the obstacles and having overcome this and that, it's touched gold. Has there been any failures or regrets in your life?
Life is full of failures, and I mean, I don't regret anything, because I feel like even failures in life are situations where they're learning experiences, or sometimes where you feel like it was a failure, but you didn't deserve that failure. Like maybe you applied for a job, and you, in your heart of hearts, was that person that should have gotten it, but you didn't. So I can't think of any major failures. I mean, I really can't think of a failure. I've failed in a million things in life, but I mean, I can't think of one that I feel like is just going to keep holding me down. I mean, if anything, maybe the most recent failure in life is when I got a BS traffic ticket recently, and I didn't think I was in the wrong, and that was my failure, and I've lost lots of night's sleep for it because of it. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, I can't really think of, if there's any failures, maybe like I was really trying to get a good grade in a class and I didn't, or I was applying for a scholarship when I was in college that I didn't get, or something like that. Or there's been a lot of jobs that I've applied for in my career. And the thing, going back to being a journalist, it is such a tough industry, because you're applying for that one job that hundreds of others are applying for. And even if you're good enough to get it, and let's say you're even a finalist, there's 5 other Paul CICALAs or people that are just as good or talented, or if not better, that are applying for that job or the finalists for that job. It's really tough to move up in this industry. So I'm very gracious that I got that opportunity to make it back to my hometown in Tucson, because it is a big thrill being able to know that you were reporting for your people, for the people you grew up with, reporting in the town you grew up in. There's a different sense of satisfaction. And I've worked in Las Vegas, El Paso before this, like I said, Southern California, many different markets, because that's what we do, we bounce around. But I have nothing, the most satisfaction I've ever gotten is this, because I'm doing stories, like even when I'm doing a story on the programs that you do to help out at the casino ballroom and the whole 9 yards. I mean, I feel that pride, because I feel like, as a kid, I would go to quinceañeras there. And now, Dave MEMBRILA is holding a fundraiser for, mariachi students in the whole 9 yards. So, and I'm doing a story on this, or I'm at least contributing to it. So you feel that satisfaction. And I don't know, I got off on a tangent, so I apologize. I probably didn't
What's
answer
your
your
why? Your
What-
why? What is
okay.
Paul CICALA's why?
Why? Because we're lucky enough that God put us on this earth, and my why is why work hard, why bust your butt? Why try to be a role model? Because there's a strong satisfaction in helping others, I think, or just or even helping yourself. I mean, that might sound selfish, but you set a goal for yourself, you accomplish that goal, and you feel good about it.
Now, Paul, and I've been wanting to ask this question even before we got to be friends.
Yeah.
I'd see on Facebook that you make these pilgrimages to Magdalena. I mean, you walk from how far is that?
It's 100 kilometers more or less from Nogales to Magdalena, about 60 something miles. But here's the thing: I've always been Catholic, born and raised. I went to what do you call it? Baptized on the south side. I would go to Santa Monica. I would actually go to Santa Monica, but I got my first communion at St. John's on 12th and Ajo. I've always been, very Catholic, my whole family. But also, I've had friends. I grew up, I bounced around a lot on the south side, but when I was living in the area where I went to Elvira, it was just a few blocks away from the reservation. At that time, the casino didn't exist. They called it quote unquote Papago Bingo. Now it's the Casino del Sol, the casino, Desert Diamond Casino, and the whole 9 yards. So I grew up with a lot of Atam friends, and a lot of the Atam, people will literally walk from San Javier all the way to Magdalena, which is more than just walking from Nogales. Wow.
Yes.
There's a lot of people of faith that will start in Nogales and go from there. But I was around people who would talk about these things, but they also talked about going straight to Magdalena and partying instead, because they have the fiestas,
the
San Francisco Javier.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna lie, my first bits of that would be going with friends to go see the partying and the festival and all that. And then I realized, I'm a person of faith and I want to do this. So I started doing that manda myself as well. And I said, you know what? A lot of people don't realize that this is something that has gone on for centuries. I mean, it goes back to the Father Kino years, where people are, in a sense, tracing some of the steps of Father Kino. And it's been going on for centuries, and a lot of Tucsonans and people from northern Sonora and many other areas take part in this pilgrimage, so to say. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna bring a little camera and I'm gonna do a story on it. So I did, and I focused on one of my good friends growing up in life, Bronson Smith. You probably have met him. And he's a proud member of the Atam tribe. And I started with him from getting the blessings and everything at the San Javier mission, all the way to us walking, all the way there and stuff. And to this day, he now will go with me. I try to make a little pilgrimage to the Basilica de Guadalupe in Mexico City every year, December 12th, and that was when La Virgen Morena, appeared before everybody with the famous cloth that we now see with the picture of the Virgin, a brown Virgin Mary, so to say. But anyways, now. Every year he will try to make it, and he's there with me many, many times as well, and we will bring other people from Tucson. You guys should come along. You guys are invited. And we will do and it's not a manda of 100 kilometers. We usually will just walk from, if you know anything about Mexico City, the Zócalo to the Basilica, which is only 8 kilometers. It's not like you're walking 100 kilometers. And I'm saying kilometers because that's what they use in Mexico and the rest of the world. But that's probably 5 miles or something. But anyway, so it's not like this grueling thing, but it's so uplifting because you see, and you've probably seen it yourself, through your guys' experience with going to Nogales and the town of Magdalena, when you see the spirit of humanity, of the Good Samaritans, when you're sitting there, you're starting to get blisters, you're hurting, you're like, man, can I make it anymore? Somebody will come up and they'll bring you a bean burrito, or they'll give you a sandwich, or just anything, and they're there to bring you up, and then you're like, I can do this. They'll bring you some Gatorade or what have you, and every year that I've always done it, I've always told myself, well, the years that I can't do it, I want to go and I want to park alongside the road, and I want to be one of those Good Samaritans, and I want to help these walkers, or as they say in Spanish, peregrinos, which I guess would translate to be pilgrims maybe. But anyway, so I take pride in that every year, and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, when I get there, I enjoy the fiestas, and I'm not talking about being a partying sense of it, but
there's the culture, there's the
so much
music,
culture.
there's the
I love
food.
it. I mean, you're looking at yaqui dancers,
supporting the vendors,
Atam dancers, that are there, combining a lot of the indigenous experiences with Catholicism and that tribute. And there's just so much culture, and Mexico, as you guys know, is like no other when it comes to that. And we obviously have that in Tucson as well, and particularly on the south side where you and I grew up. And where did you grow up? You grew up on the west side, right?
No, south side.
Oh, you're south side too.
Right
Nice.
there by the rodeo grounds.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, that's right. And it's funny because where I grew up, one of the many areas, but I mean, when I'm talking more the Elvira years, since we were talking about some of my Atam friends, and of course, most people from the Tohono Atam Nation go to Desert View or Sunnyside, mostly Desert View. So a lot of my friends were that, and you know, my friend Lucky Salway is the one that made this right here. Have you seen this?
No.
Old school U of A logo.
Oh, wow.
But look at it. You're on Atam land. Lucky Salway, he's a great artist. He does murals, and he's a friend of mine that I went to high school with, and you know, and I'd just be happening to wear this today. I didn't wear it on purpose today, by the way. I didn't know what to wear today, and I didn't even know this was like TV. I thought it was a podcast that was like our voice. But anyways, going back to that, I forgot what I was gonna say because I'm one of those ADHD guys with the H standing for hyperactive. But anyways, I think you got the gist of it.
Yes, yes.
How much time we got? Because we're getting close to the
No,
time
let's keep
you
going.
wanna
Let's
go.
keep going. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Martha,
Yeah.
what you got?
Well, you know, we have all these younger generations, right? These younger generations now, we didn't have phones, we had beepers. We can spell with the beepers and send messages
Yes.
that way and go to the, you know, the phone and stick our 25 cents to make the
Exactly.
phone call, right? We have all these, all this technology, all this internet, you know, now that these younger generations have to deal with. Right. I mean, even the bullying system, you know, was in for a while for all these younger generations.
Yeah.
That's still going on. I see some of these younger generations. They don't want to work hard. They want
see.
to get paid, and they don't want to, you know. I used to volunteer my time. Heck, if I'm gonna learn how to sing, I'm gonna be in his class for free. Teach me how to sing,
Yeah.
and then I can teach somebody else how to do that, right? But I'm not seeing this in these younger generations. What would you like to, you know, share to them?
I mean, I would like to just share not only to them, but maybe to their parents. Don't give a kid a cell phone when they're 12 years old. I mean, until they're like probably 14 or 15 years old. And I know parents are like, well, yeah, you know, I care about my kids. I worry about them. I want to be able to. Then get them a flip phone that you can just call them with. Because I feel like even me as an adult, man, I get on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any of that, and I waste hours and hours and hours of my life getting on there. And I'm an adult, and I feel like kids, it's the same thing. And you know, when we were kids, we'd ride our bikes. I'm surprised
We
that I
would
don't have
pass the
skin cancer.
messages, or we'd have those
Oh,
little
yeah,
thingamajiggers
exactly.
that we'd have.
And it's funny because when we were growing up, I remember you used to either
Pass
think,
it to him.
oh, pass what?
The message.
Oh,
and
that's-
just-
Oh yeah. Here we go. Yeah, we're not
Right?
seeing each other. We're just
Right.
friends. Yeah. No. But anyways, but I know that I feel like, you know, back in those days, you know, we would play sports, and I even remember, like, you know, the pagers, right? Back in those days, you were either a drug dealer if you had a pager, or you were like, ooh, he's rich. I remember when I went to USC, and it was a big culture shock when you go to USC because it's a lot different than what I grew up with. And you see a lot of people with money, and these are sons and daughters of people that work in the Hollywood industry and the whole 9 yards, or, you know, like, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of people on financial aid like myself as well, but I would see these kids, not kids, but young adults, 18, 19, 20 years old, on their cell phones. And this was back in the early 90s, and I was like, damn, they're rich. They
The
have
block phones.
And I was like, they're rich. They have cell phones. Wow. And it's funny how now we take that for granted, and you could be poor and you still have a cell phone. You still have you still have a Cricket phone. You still have a T-Mobile phone or what have you. And nowadays, I feel like it distracts so many people, and it begins with the kids. So I guess that's my suggestion to the kids, and also get involved with correct extracurricular activities, because that's what's going to keep you busy, and it's going to shape you, and it's going to give you good friends. Because, you know, we all grew up around quote unquote bad friends and bad influences too, and sometimes that shapes you, unfortunately, and you need to find those good friends and those good role models that are going to keep you out. And that's one reason why I went to USC, because I knew that a lot of the friends that I grew up with weren't, you know, quote unquote college bound. So I knew that if I was gonna make it and I really wanted to concentrate on my studies, I needed to go out of state. If I didn't, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, if I didn't go to USC, I would have probably gone to ASU or NAU, because I got the Regent Scholarship. I don't even know if that exists anymore.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I got out of Tucson, it would allow me to truly concentrate on my studies and making it in life. And if I was here, people who don't go to college or don't go to school or aren't doing disciplined things, they just don't understand. They might be like, Paul, come on, let's do this. Oh, I'll pick you up, we'll do this. And they don't understand when you say, no, I got to study. No, I got to go to work tomorrow. I got to do this. So sometimes you're never selling out. You're not leaving your friends, because I'm still friends with all the people that I grew up with, and I'm still the same way, and I'm still the same person that I was in high school. I really am. And some people could say that I can be a little bit quote unquote ghetto at times because of that. But that's me. But that said, I knew that if I wanted to not let some of those negative influences growing up hold me down, it would be better for me to get a brand new environment. And I got that at USC. And like I said, it was very intimidating when I first got there, as it is anybody going to college, coming from marginal backgrounds. But luckily, I learned a lot more in life. I found other people that came from similar situations as me, but I also met other people in life that were totally different walks of life, and it really opened my mind up to what diversity truly is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, again, Paul, we want to thank you for being our guest. This has
That's
been
it.
This
Come
is
on,
awesome.
That's it.
quick
We're
hour.
gonna keep going for like. Has it been an hour already?
Yeah,
I talked too
after-
much. I'm sorry. I
it's-
went on
no,
minutes.
it's
I went on
No,
a million
this is-
tangents. We didn't even go through half of these questions here.
No, but it was getting to know you, getting to know your
thanks.
your humble you,
Yeah.
right? And just seeing that passion
Yeah.
and that comes out of you and caring for people and your struggles.
Well, that's going back to now what you'd say real quick, if you don't mind. Some suggestions I would give to kids: volunteer. And I mean, you get so much satisfaction. And I, as a youngster growing up, I was so busy with work, school, this and that I didn't necessarily, I didn't have those opportunities to volunteer. Nobody told me about it. But when I first started at USC, I started volunteering at the Special Olympics, and I had the best feeling in the world knowing that you're putting a smile on somebody else's face. And now, as much as I can, I will continue to volunteer. I MC a lot of events, when I can to volunteer, or if it's even putting in like grunt work. I mean, when I do the Special Olympics stuff, I mean, I'm there and I'm helping the kids. I was part of the Special Olympics Arizona, and I'm not trying to say that to like boast or whatever, but I'm just saying that those are the satisfactions you get in life. As a youngster, also right out of college, I got with the Rotary Foundation. I got a scholarship from them, which is the largest international organization dedicated to service, and in some ways, it's almost like the Peace Corps. So I spent a year in Mexico City doing postgrad at La UNAM, which is one of the biggest, most respected universities in Mexico, la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. But you were an ambassador of goodwill, or they called it embajador de buena voluntad first, student second. So I took part in a lot of service activities throughout that region of Mexico, the Sierra Norte de Puebla, which is near Mexico City itself, plant reforestation projects, things like that. And it was work and it was elbow grease, but in the end, you feel like, man, it's worth it when you see the smile on the people's faces that you're helping out. So going back to your question,
Your heart's filled.
even in her younger years, my daughter, I would take her to everything that I would volunteer for because I wanted her to see that and I wanted her to feel that feeling. And I hope it has had an impact on her as well as it could with anybody else.
And any of the viewers that are watching right now, I want to give a shout out to the Sunnyside District, to Desert View, to Sunnyside, to the South Side.
Yep.
Right?
Heck yeah.
Because the more that we're talking, and Dave, you were on the South Side too. You went to Pueblo High School. I went to Sunnyside. We have a Jaguar in the house today.
Heck yeah. And this guy graduated from high school with his PhD. You know that, right?
Pueblo High School
You know it, baby.
diploma.
I almost wish I went to Pueblo so I could say that, man. I mean, that's awesome.
We're Sunnyside District.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, and they do stereotype the South Side. When I used to work in investigations, it was like, oh no, vives en el sur. And I'm like, yeah, there's stuff happening on the north side, the east side, and I'd give them examples, right? So it's going to happen everywhere. But I think that particularly in the south side, we have hungry people that want to be successful. And we had role models like Mr. Moriyoki, like
Or even
Dave
Chief
MEMBRILA.
Miranda. Chief Miranda, the longtime Tucson police chief, was a Sunnyside grad. Raul Grijalva. We have so many people from the Sunnyside district that have done great things in life. And Pueblo High School, too.
Yep.
Gosh.
Yeah, let's not forget Pueblo High School.
No,
right?
exactly.
So we have all these role models and mentors and examples and successful people, and my hopes are for us to continue to help these people out, adult or children, and continue to support like you're doing the volunteer work, anything that we can do. There's going to be somebody out there that's going to look at this show and is going to resonate with some of our experience. So that is the whole goal, is to touch
Agreed.
them.
And if you don't mind, since we're talking about some of those stereotypes of the quote-unquote South Side, it's sad that to this day, the South Side still has that stereotype, because I feel like Midtown and other areas have a lot more crime and a lot more problems than the South Side. And one reason that I got into journalism, too, and I wrote for the Jaguar Prince, Desert View, student-run newspaper. Same thing when I went to college at USC. I went Daily Trojan, blah, blah, blah. But I got into it because it frustrated the heck out of me that I would watch the news as a youngster, and I felt like the only time they did a story on the South Side was when there was a shooting or when there was a drug bust. It was always only for negativity. But if they were doing a general story that might even have a positive flair, like, hey, let's do a story on how young families are buying homes because interest rates are down, they'll always get, I don't know, Clyde and Tucker Smith from the North Side as a subject instead of somebody from the South Side. So like there was never stories that showed the positivity, and I hated that. And also I would like to give a quick shout out. One of the reasons I got into journalism too is because one of my biggest influences in life, even then, even though I didn't know her, was watching Lupita Murillo on air. And she was a reporter for many, many years, and I would see her and I would, I was like, man, this reporter, when she's talking about a drug bust, she says it's marijuana. She doesn't say marijuana, she's saying marijuana. I'm like, that's just like everybody else I know from the South Side when they're talking about marijuana.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she didn't say mota.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But anyways,
Yeah.
But to this day, I can't express how thankful I am and how blessed I am that I get to say that I work every single day with Lupita Murillo, with the person that I grew up looking up to, saying I would love to be a reporter like her one day. And then next thing you know, I'm with her and I'm working with her, and she's one of the gung-ho people that have stuck in this business. Because as a journalist, as we're talking about off air, a lot of people get burned out in this industry. They want a 9 to 5. It's hard to have a social life or a family life because you don't get off work until after the 10 o'clock newscast, which is, not getting home till almost midnight in many cases. And it's really hard to have that type of life. So a lot of people leave it, and there's a lot of jobs that pay more. And she stuck it out. And over the years, we used to get photographers every time. Now our job isn't a reporter. It's called an MMJ, a multimedia journalist, because you're doing everything. You're picking up a camera, you're shooting, you're doing the interview, you're editing it yourself, you're shooting your own live shots many times. You're coming back, you have to rewrite it in a print version for the website of the station you're working for. It's a growing industry, and a lot of quote-unquote old school reporters like Lupita, like Bud Foster, they've stuck it out. They're some of the few that have said, oh, okay, I don't get a photographer anymore. Bring it on. Let me pick up a camera. I'm going to shoot
But
it.
they're part of the community.
No,
we all grew up watching Lupita Murillo.
And she's still there. And she doesn't have to be. She has a passion and a love for journalism and telling stories, and she's continuing to do it despite the stresses. And she was my role model then, and I would say as a kid when I was in high school, just not knowing her, and I would even say she's a bigger role model now as an adult, and I'm just so fortunate that I get to work with her every single day.
That's great. Catch Paul CICALA on Channel 4, KVOA. We'd like to thank once again.
No, thank you guys.
Martha Dabdoub with Real TMD, where you're a pulse away.
And Dave Membrila, your other co-host with Hypnosis Works LLC, as well as Martha's first agent. We want to say goodbye to you. This is Empowering People.
Yeah,
Woo,
baby.
with
Bear
Paul
down.
CICALA.
If you have
We
any,
talked about it. Bear down and fight on, because I still USC in Arizona, baby. All right.
if you have any comments, concerns, or questions, please find us on Facebook, like our page, Empowering People. And I believe you set up a chat room, right? Somebody set up a chat room. We could talk to each other. So if you have any suggestions for future shows, please send us names. We always are looking for that one guest who will make a difference in your life. Thanks, and see ya.
Ciao.
God bless everybody.
Adios.